Hello everyone, today we're going to look at how the revolution starts to bring reform and ends up bringing lots of terror. So, the storming of the Bastille occurs and the French people are all excited and happy and rejoicing that they will finally have some change in their country. However, not everybody's happy. It starts to spread out this giant wave of panic, this fear. It's called the Great Fear. And people, particularly in the nobility, the clergy, are very concerned about what the peasants have been doing. The peasants are worried because there's rumors rolling around that the nobility is going to hire people to come and kill them. So there's a lot of craziness, and the National Assembly is working very hard to try and get France towards change. So there's a lot of fear, and this period of time we're looking at is calling into the Great Fear and will lead into the Reign of Terror. So the National Assembly is trying to get rid of the feudal privileges of the first and second estate, and the Great Fear is going to help them do that. So the objectives for today. Now again, once this all comes up, you may want to pause it so that you can take the time to write it, and then you can come back to my lovely little voice and go along with me. But the objectives in anything that we do means this is the stuff you have to know and be able to do. So these are the three things that I expect of you and what you should be able to do by the time we're done with this. So you should be able to analyze the factors that contribute to the French Revolution becoming more radical. You should be able to explain to me what happened during the Reign of Terror. And you should be able to evaluate France's reaction to the Reign of Terror, meaning, is it going to be a reaction that puts France on the right path and responds adequately to the problems that the Reign of Terror caused, or is it one that's going to lead to more issues? Okay? Alright, so, as we said, all this panic is running throughout France. The peasants are waiting, just waiting with bated breath that the nobles have an army coming to get them, made up of foreign villains, and that's not coming. But the peasants themselves are still angry, and so they're going out and they're running into the noblemen's homes and taking and stealing the papers, the old feudal papers that had said that they were tied to that manor, and sometimes even burning down the manor house in the hopes of destroying all of that paperwork. So you've got total and complete chaos going on in much of the French countryside. And the peasants, again, don't trust the nobility, and perhaps with great reason. So the Great Fear is this giant wave of just abject panic that is going among the French peasantry, but then also the clergy and the nobility as well, because they see that the peasants are getting out of control, and for so long they had been controlled. So on August 4th of 1789, the nobles in the National Assembly join with the Third Estate, and they vote to end feudal privileges. And that is something that is a reform and seems to be making things, hopefully going to make things better. But 2 months later, in October of 1789, there is a giant march on Versailles where the women of Paris marched 12 miles in the rain to the Palace of Versailles. They were angry. They resented what Louis and Marie Antoinette were doing. Their children were starving, and these people are living in luxury. And they forced the king and queen out of the palace, so this was the last time that Louis would see his beloved Versailles. And the women followed his family on another 12-mile march. They were out of control. They were trying to get the king and queen to come into Paris, and so they do because of this women's march. And so these women are actually viewed as revolutionary leaders, and they're honored as heroes of the revolution. So the Great Fear is a time, again, of tremendous outrage. And again, you see Paris during the Great Fear, people literally out in the streets trying to figure out what's going on. So as this stuff is going on, you also have on the government end of things, where the Third Estate and the National Assembly are working, there making some progress. They are getting towards the goals of the revolution. So in the early stages, you kind of have this radical grouping, and you have this radical idea coming out because of the Great Fear. So you have people being scared and going towards the more extreme. But you also have a National Assembly that's doing a lot. They have really created the slogan of this revolution, which is liberty, equality, and fraternity. And hopefully you see in there the ideals of John Locke, Rousseau to a point. And that is powerful. The people respond well to this slogan. And what you're going to see is the National Assembly is 3 weeks after they vote to get rid of the old feudal privileges, which happened again August 4th, 1789. Now they're going to create a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and that's going to be put out there to the public and shown that these are the rights that all men are entitled to. Again, we should see Enlightenment ideas here. It's modeled after what the U.S. did in their revolution with the Declaration of Independence. Then they sit down and write a constitution in 1791, okay? And during all this upheaval, the king does try to escape. France declares war on other European countries. So again, you're seeing some moderation in the government. So this, the government people, the people working on these problems are moderate. They're middle of the road. They're trying. They don't necessarily want to get rid of the king. They just want a constitution that guarantees the people their rights, and then the king can continue to rule as long as he is enforcing that constitution. So the picture that you're about to see is the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So it starts off moderate, as you can see, but there are twinges and little, hints of the radicalism that is to come. Declaration of the Rights of Man, you can see entirely written in French, right? So you can't read it, but you get the point, and I'll give you the English translation. So what's going to happen next? How do they get from the king enforcing a constitution that was written by the people to the king and queen being executed publicly? Okay, and this is where we see it. It's radicalizing this revolution. So the king and queen are arrested, and they spend a tremendous amount of time in prison, which for the royal family, I'm sure, is quite a change. In January of 1793, the Committee of Public Safety does decide that King Louis XVI needs to be executed. So he's executed. Then 10 months later, now imagine being Marie Antoinette. You're sitting in a French prison. Your son, the Dauphin, has died. He had, we believe, pneumonia and died in a French prison. And now your husband is dead. 10 months they make you wait before they actually end up killing you. And with her death really comes the Reign of Terror, this radical phase in the revolution that is going to cause all kinds of issues. And that you're going to see, does it really play into what the goals of this revolution really were and what it is? So there you have the king and queen. Okay, this is a depiction of the execution of the king, and this is him depicted just before he's placed under the guillotine and ready to be executed. Now, there's a group that comes in that's really going to make it so that we have the radicalization of this, okay? And they're called the Jacobins. And what happened with this is that France, in this time period, was divided really into these political clubs. So there were a lot of these political clubs that were out there, and one that becomes the strongest is the Jacobin Club. But they were radical. They wanted the king and queen dead. They wanted a new government established, a republic in France. And what happens is, in the chaos of the time, the man who emerges as the leader, because there's Marat, there is Danton, there are these other men who are prominent in the Jacobins, but the one who emerges as the leader is Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre. During the time France is, again, they've declared war on Austria and Prussia, and what happens is other countries join with Austria and Prussia to try to put France in her place. they call it the First Coalition. So Britain, Holland, and Spain joined with Prussia and Austria to fight against France. So clearly France is having a difficult time in this war. It creates enough chaos that Robespierre is able to assume control over France. So the Jacobins are the radical political party that really take control. And this is when the terror begins. And again, they're the ones who pushed for the execution of the king and queen. They are the ones who wanted the monarchy abolished, and they wanted a French republic. And, that is not true to the original ideas of the people in France who were taking and leading this revolution. They were more interested in securing the rights of the people, Enlightenment ideals. So, that's Maximilien Robespierre. He's got to figure out how he's going to keep this war going and how he's going to win it. Because by 1793, again, 3 other countries have joined, and so France is getting beaten. And what he does is he starts a draft. And he drafts over 300,000 French citizens into the army, and then drafted more, even women. By 1794, the French army is 800,000 people strong. Peasants, now, religion plays a role in this revolution, because the peasantry who saw the beheading of the king, priests who saw this, they were very horrified, and they were not trusting what these people were doing, the Jacobins were doing. And so not only now were the Jacobins concerned about the nobility and the clergy, but now they're concerned about the lower clergy and the peasantry. That is kind of, to them, becoming anti-revolutionary. And so Robespierre, in trying to control them, launches the Reign of Terror. So it's about a 1-year period, July of 1793 to 1794. So after they kill, you've got the king and queen dead. You have estimates going from 3,000 to 40,000 people died in the reigns of terror at the hands of the guillotine. And so Maximilien Robespierre, his whole idea was, he set up this committee of public safety, and this committee was tasked to keep order in France. And a direct quote from him, "Liberty cannot be secured unless criminals lose their heads." He felt that this extremist approach would keep and secure order. He scares enough people, though, that Robespierre is the last victim of his own reign of terror. He has his head separated from his body, and that essentially is going to end it. The reign of terror, again, you have the leading political figures all going into the gallows. Georges Danton, who was high up in the Jacobin party, himself was in danger, and he, was executed. His friends didn't stick up for him, and they joined in condemning him to death. He was really anxious about it. He wanted them to not show his head to the people. Or he said, "Don't forget to show my head to the people, because it's such a good looking." So this is the Committee of Public Safety. These are, Robespierre and those men that are, again, tasked with trying to keep order in France. You would think that in the Reign of Terror that it would be the nobility and the upper people executed, but really, 85% of the victims of the Reign of Terror were peasants. Or they were, the urban working poor, or the middle class, the artisans. These are the people whose benefit the revolution was supposed to be for, and they are, by and large, the biggest contingent that is actually executed in the Reign of Terror. So, again, is this radicalism in line with the ideas that they're fighting for in the French Revolution? So after the Reign of Terror, the revolution, again, people are frightened, they're scared, and so things get more moderate. Things start to calm down, and people are a little wary of any one person getting too much power again. So you see that kind of arc. Moderate in the beginning, going to radical, and now back down to moderate. To kind of prevent one person from getting too much power, the new government is set up. It's called the Directory, and it's 5-man government. It's weak, it's corrupt, because 5 men working together, whoever your friends are, your allegiances to, you can be easily bought. So Napoleon Bonaparte is appointed to this Directory, and is working, with the Directory, but he, being a war hero, saving France in a seemingly impossible situation against the First Coalition, it's really setting the stage for Napoleon Bonaparte to come to power. So the reaction to the Reign of Terror and looking at this directory, making it weak, was that really in the best interest of the French Revolution in carrying forth its ideals and making sure that, the rights of the people were protected. And so that's the basic view of the Reign of Terror and the moderation to radicalization of this movement. When we look, I want to show you a few more pictures so that you get a sense of, this is Robespierre being marched off to the guillotine, head held high. This is the crowd showing them his head and his execution. This is a public audience with the directory, so these are the directory members, and this is the man of the hour, the one that we'll be spending lots of time talking about in the coming weeks, or coming days, Napoleon Bonaparte. And you can see from this picture that his claim to fame and why he's revered so strongly in France is his military prowess. So that's where we're going to leave it with the Reign of Terror, and I will see you soon.